The October wind cut through my worn jacket as I stepped out of my rusted Honda in front of Uncle Gerald's estate. The sprawling colonial house loomed against the gray Ohio sky, its pristine white columns and manicured lawns a stark reminder of the divide between this side of the family and mine. I pulled my jacket tighter, knowing full well that the threadbare fabric and oil stains under my fingernails would draw whispers before I even made it through the front door. Cars lined the circular driveway. BMWs, Audis, a gleaming Mercedes that I knew belonged to my cousin Tyler. My beat-up Honda looked like a rust bucket among thoroughbreds. I sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, trying to summon the courage to face what was coming. Uncle Gerald's funeral had been hard enough 3 days ago, watching everyone cry crocodile tears while calculating their expected windfall. Today would be worse. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The massive oak door opened before I could knock. Margaret, my mother, stood there in her best black dress. Still modest compared to the designer outfits I'd glimpsed through the windows, but clean and pressed with the care she put into everything she did. "Ethan," she said softly, pulling me into a hug that smelled of her familiar lavender soap. "I'm so glad you came." "Of course I came, Mom. Gerald was family." I squeezed her back, drawing strength from her presence. She was the only person in this house who'd ever looked at me without disappointment in her eyes. As we walked through the marble foyer, the murmur of voices from the living room grew louder. I recognized most of them, aunts and uncles I saw only at funerals and weddings, cousins who'd made it clear years ago that my blue-collar existence embarrassed them. The chandelier above cast everything in warm light, making the expensive furniture and oil paintings glow with inherited wealth. "Well, well, look what the cat dragged in." Tyler's voice cut through the room like a blade. My cousin stood by the fireplace, drink in hand, looking every inch the golden boy in his tailored charcoal suit. At 31, Tyler had the kind of effortless confidence that came from never doubting your place in the world. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his smile practiced and sharp. The room fell silent. 20 pairs of eyes turned toward me, taking in my scuffed work boots and the jacket I'd bought at Goodwill 2 years ago. I felt my face burn, but I kept my expression neutral. I'd learned long ago not to give them the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. "Tyler," I nodded, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. "Gerald was family," I repeated, my jaw tight. "That's reason enough." "Oh, absolutely. Family loyalty. How noble." Tyler's grin widened. "Just don't get your hopes up about anything more substantial than sentiment, yeah?" I wanted to tell him exactly what I thought of his smug superiority, but I swallowed the words. Fighting with Tyler would only prove their point that I didn't belong here. Instead, I found an empty chair in the corner and sat down, letting the conversations flow around me while I waited for this humiliation to be over. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed 3 o'clock, and as if summoned by the sound, Victoria Hayes entered the room. Uncle Gerald's lawyer was a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and the kind of professional composure that commanded instant attention. She carried a leather briefcase and wore an expression that gave nothing away. "Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for gathering here today for the reading of Gerald Walker's last will and testament."
Victoria opened her briefcase with practiced efficiency, removing a thick document bound in dark blue covers. The room fell silent except for the soft crackle of the fire and the distant tick of the grandfather clock. She put on her reading glasses and cleared her throat. "I, Gerald Marcus Walker, being of sound mind and body, do hereby set forth my final wishes for the distribution of my earthly possessions." I found myself studying the faces around me. Uncle Richard leaned forward in his leather armchair, his wife Patricia clutching her pearls with barely concealed avarice. Aunt Susan dabbed at dry eyes with a handkerchief while mentally calculating her expected share. But it was Tyler who commanded the room's attention, standing by the fireplace like a king waiting for his coronation. To my nephew, Tyler Charles Walker, I leave the bulk of my estate, including my primary residence here in Columbus, my vacation home in Kiowa Island, my portfolio of commercial real estate properties valued at approximately $3.2 million, and my shares in Walker Development Corporation. The room erupted in congratulations. Tyler's smile was blinding as uncles clapped him on the back and aunts kissed his cheek. Someone popped a bottle of champagne that had been waiting on the sideboard. Tyler caught my eye across the room and raised his glass in a mock toast, his expression triumphant. "I always knew Gerald had good sense," Uncle Richard boomed, shaking Tyler's hand vigorously. "You'll do right by the family legacy, son." "Gerald saw potential where it mattered," Tyler replied smoothly, though his eyes stayed fixed on me. "He understood the importance of keeping wealth in capable hands." I sank deeper into my chair, the familiar weight of inadequacy settling on my shoulders like a lead blanket. This was exactly what I had expected, but hearing it made official still stung. Around me, the celebration continued, while I became increasingly invisible, just another piece of furniture gathering dust in the corner. "Furthermore," Victoria continued once the noise died down, "Tyler will inherit my investment accounts with Merrill Lynch, my art collection, and my vintage automobile collection housed in the garage behind this property." More applause, more champagne. Tyler was now worth over $4 million, and everyone wanted to bask in his reflected glory. I caught a snatch of conversation from Uncle Gerald. Always knew Ethan would amount to nothing, just like his father. The words hit like a physical blow. I gripped the arms of my chair, fighting the urge to walk out. Only Mom's presence kept me rooted to the spot. She sat quietly beside me, her hands folded in her lap, but I could feel her tension. Victoria waited for the celebration to die down before continuing. "I have here provisions for several charitable donations, as well as smaller bequests to longtime employees and friends." She read through a list of names and amounts. Gerald's housekeeper received enough money to retire comfortably. His gardener got a generous bonus. The local library where Gerald had volunteered received a substantial donation. Even the mailman, who'd served his route for 20 years, got a check for $5,000. Each name on that list made my exclusion more glaring. Tyler wasn't wrong. I really wasn't getting anything. I'd been foolish to hope, even briefly, that Gerald might have remembered me in some small way. But then Victoria paused. She flipped to the back of the document, her professional mask slipping for just a moment to reveal what looked like surprise. "There appears to be one final section, one that is sealed separately and is to be read last." The room fell silent again, but this time the quiet felt different, charged with uncertainty rather than expectation. Tyler's smile faltered slightly as he set down his champagne glass.
Victoria broke the seal on a separate envelope and unfolded a single page. Her eyebrows rose fractionally as she read it silently first. When she looked up, her gaze found me across the room. "To my nephew Ethan James Walker," she began, and I felt the world tilt sideways. "I leave my workshop property at 847 Maple Ridge Road, including the building, all tools and equipment contained therein, and the 3 acres of land on which it sits." The silence that followed was deafening. I stared at Victoria, certain I'd misheard. Around the room, expressions shifted from celebration to confusion to something approaching shock. "Additionally," Victoria continued, her voice steady, "Ethan will receive this sealed personal letter, which I have been instructed to give to him privately following the reading of this will." Tyler's face had gone pale beneath his tan. That's impossible. Gerald never mentioned any workshop to me. What workshop? What letter?" "I'm sorry, Tyler, but the will is quite clear.
This property was purchased by your uncle 18 months ago and registered under a private trust specifically for this purpose. My hands were shaking. I pressed them against my thighs, trying to process what was happening. Gerald had left me something. Not just something. Property. Land. A building. After a lifetime of being overlooked, dismissed, forgotten, he had thought of me. "It's probably worthless," Tyler said quickly, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Uncle Gerald probably felt sorry for him. "Gerald's pity prize," someone muttered, but the comment fell flat. Mom reached over and squeezed my hand, her eyes bright with unshed tears. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper, meant only for me. "He saw you, Ethan. He really saw you." Victoria finished reading the formal legal language, then closed the document. The room remained unnaturally quiet, the earlier celebration completely deflated. Tyler stood frozen by the fireplace, his perfect composure cracked for the first time I could remember. "When can I started, then stopped to clear my throat. "When can I see the property?" "The keys and deed will be available tomorrow morning, along with this." She held up a sealed envelope with my name written in Gerald's familiar handwriting. I stood on unsteady legs, the room spinning slightly around me. After 33 years of being the family failure, the disappointment, the cautionary tale, Uncle Gerald had left me something. It might not be millions like Tyler's inheritance, but it was mine. It was recognition. It was proof that someone had believed I mattered. As I walked toward Victoria to accept the envelope, I caught Tyler's expression. The smugness had been replaced by something uglier, a mixture of humiliation and rage that made my stomach clench. But for the first time in my life, I didn't look away. That night, I sat alone in my small apartment above the auto repair shop where I worked, turning Gerald's letter over and over in my hands. The envelope was thick cream paper, expensive stuff that felt substantial between my fingers. My name was written across the front in Gerald's careful script, the same handwriting I remembered from birthday cards when I was young, back when he still sent them, before Tyler became the family's golden child. I made myself a cup of coffee, added a shot of bourbon to steady my nerves, and finally broke the seal. "Dear Ethan, if you're reading this, then Victoria has done as I asked, and the workshop is now yours. I imagine you're confused, maybe even suspicious of my motives. The rest of the family certainly will be. I want you to know that this decision came from 20 years of watching and waiting, of seeing you grow into the man I hoped you'd become, despite every obstacle they put in your way. While Tyler was handed everything on a silver platter, you learned the value of hard work. While others in this family measured worth by bank accounts and social status, you found dignity in honest labor."
Do you remember the summer you turned 16? Your mother brought you to help me with some repairs around the main house. The other boys your age were at summer camps or lounging by pools, but you spent 2 weeks crawling under my porch to fix rotted support beams, never once complaining about the heat or the spiders or the fact that your cousins mocked you for doing servant's work. I watched you that summer, Ethan. I saw how you studied each problem, how you took pride in doing things right the first time, how you treated my tools with respect and cleaned up after yourself without being asked. That's when I knew. The workshop isn't charity or pity, son. It's recognition. You're the only one in this family who understands that real wealth isn't what you inherit, it's what you build with your own hands. There's something else, something the others don't need to know just yet. In the locked cabinet behind my workbench, you'll find papers that explain the rest of what I'm leaving you. Mrs. Larkin next door has the key. Tell her I said you're ready to finish what I started. I'm proud of you, Ethan. I always have been. Your uncle, Gerald. P.S. Don't let Tyler's bluster fool you. His inheritance comes with more debt than he realizes. Sometimes the biggest prizes carry the heaviest chains. I read the letter 3 times before setting it down with shaking hands. The words blurred as tears I'd been holding back for years finally spilled over. Gerald had been watching. He'd been paying attention when I thought no one cared. All those times I'd felt invisible, forgotten, he'd seen me. The bourbon burned warm in my chest, mixing with something I hadn't felt in so long I'd almost forgotten its name. Hope. Gerald had left me more than property. He'd left me proof that my life had meaning, that the work I did mattered, that someone believed in me. But his final words about Tyler nagged at me. What debt? And what had Gerald started that I was meant to finish? The next morning I drove out to Maple Ridge Road with Victoria beside me, the deed and keys burning a hole in my jacket pocket. The property was 20 minutes outside Columbus, down a winding road lined with oak trees that had already turned brilliant shades of orange and gold. When we pulled up to 847 Maple Ridge, I sat in the car for a long moment, staring at what was now mine. The workshop was a modest single-story building with weathered cedar siding and a red metal roof. It looked solid and well-maintained, with large windows that would let in plenty of natural light. Behind it, 3 acres of gently rolling land stretched back to a tree line. It wasn't grand or flashy, but it had something Tyler's inheritance lacked. It felt honest. "It's perfect," I murmured, and Victoria smiled. "Gerald thought you'd like it. He spent a lot of time here these past months, getting it ready." We walked up the gravel path to the front door. My hands shook slightly as I fitted the key into the lock, but it turned smoothly. The door swung open with a soft creak, and I stepped inside. The workshop took my breath away. Gerald had equipped it with everything a mechanic could dream of: professional-grade tool chests, a hydraulic lift, air compressors, welding equipment, and machinery I recognized but had never been able to afford. Everything was organized with military precision, tools arranged by size and function, workbenches clean and ready for use. But it was the walls that made me stop and stare. Gerald had covered them with photographs, dozens of them, all featuring me. There I was at 8 years old, proudly holding the wrench he'd let me use to help fix his lawnmower. At 12, grinning beside the go-kart we'd built together one summer. At 16, serious and focused as I worked on those porch repairs he'd mentioned in his letter.
"My God," Victoria breathed beside me. "He documented everything." I walked closer to one particular photo I'd never seen before. It showed me at my high school graduation, standing alone by the parking lot while other families celebrated around their graduates. I remembered that day, how isolated I'd felt, how sure I was that my life would amount to nothing. But Gerald had been there. He'd been watching, caring enough to capture the moment. In the center of the far wall hung a framed certificate, "Property of Ethan James Walker, Master Mechanic." Below it, in Gerald's handwriting, "Every man deserves recognition for honest work." A noise from outside made us both turn. Through the window I saw an elderly woman approaching, carrying a casserole dish and wearing a gentle smile. Victoria opened the door as she knocked. "You must be Ethan," the woman said, looking me up and down with kind eyes. "I'm Helen Larkin. I live next door. Gerald told me all about you." "Mrs. Larkin," I said, remembering Gerald's letter. "He said you have something for me?" Her smile widened. "I certainly do. But first let me say how sorry I am for your loss. Gerald was a good man, and he thought the world of you, talked about you all the time, especially these past few months while he was fixing up this place." She set down the casserole and pulled a small key from her pocket. "He made me promise to give you this when you came, along with a message. Tell Ethan he's ready to finish what I started." I took the key with trembling fingers. It was old-fashioned, made of heavy brass, and it fit perfectly in the lock of a tall cabinet I'd noticed in the back corner. The cabinet was dark oak, built to last, with Gerald's initials carved into the top. Inside, I found manila folders filled with official-looking documents, bank statements, and legal papers. At first glance, I saw numbers that made my head spin: account balances, investment records, property deeds. But it was the letter paper clipped to the top folder that explained everything. Ethan, this is what I really wanted to leave you. Not just the workshop, but the means to build something lasting. The account information is all here. Use it wisely. And remember, true wealth comes from what you create, not what you inherit. G. Mrs. Larkin patted my shoulder gently. She said you'd understand what to do with it. Said you had something the others didn't: integrity. As I stared at the papers in my hands, I realized Gerald hadn't just left me recognition or property or even money. He'd left me a chance to prove that his faith in me hadn't been misplaced. The workshop wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. And somewhere in Columbus, Tyler was probably drowning in the debt Gerald had hinted at, discovering that his glittering inheritance came with chains he hadn't seen. But that was his problem now. This workshop, this land, this secret trust, this was mine. And for the first time in my 33 years, I knew exactly what I wanted to build with it. Tyler found me at the workshop 3 days later, his BMW screeching to a halt in the gravel driveway. I was organizing Gerald's tools, taking inventory of what had become mine, when he burst through the door without knocking. "What the hell is this place really worth?" he demanded, his face flush with anger. Gone was the polished composure from the will reading. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled. "It's a workshop, Tyler. Tools, land, honest work. Nothing you'd understand. Cut the humble act, Ethan. I know there's more to this. Gerald wouldn't waste time on some sentimental gesture." He stalked around the room, examining everything with calculating eyes. "There has to be something else. Money, investments, something." I kept my expression neutral, but my heart pounded. The bank documents were safely locked away, but Tyler's desperation was obvious. "Why does it matter? You got millions." "That's not—" He caught himself, jaw clenching. "This doesn't add up. Gerald was too smart to leave you just this." The truth was written across his face. His inheritance wasn't what it seemed. Gerald's postscript about debt was proving prophetic. Mrs. Larkin's words echoed in my mind as I studied the documents that night. The hidden account contained nearly $2 million, accumulated through decades of careful investments Gerald had kept separate from his main estate. Unlike Tyler's flashy inheritance, this was clean money with no strings attached. The account instructions were simple. The funds were mine to use as I saw fit, with one request: that I honored Gerald's memory by building something lasting. The workshop could become a legitimate business, a place where honest work was valued and rewarded. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely excited about the future. While Tyler scrambled to manage properties he couldn't afford to maintain, I could build something real from the ground up. Charles showed up on a Thursday evening, looking older and more desperate than I remembered. My father hadn't contacted me in 3 years, but news of the inheritance had apparently reached him. "Son," he said, that familiar wheedling tone I remembered from childhood. "I heard about Gerald's gift. That's wonderful news." "What do you want, Dad?" His smile faltered. "Can't a father visit his son? Maybe we could talk about opportunities, partnerships." The answer is no. Mom appeared behind me, her face hard. "Charles, you need to leave now." "Margaret, be reasonable. Family should stick together." "Family doesn't abandon their child when things get tough," she snapped. "Get out." Watching him slink away, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I was done being anyone's backup plan. Tyler cornered me at the workshop a week later, his desperation now complete. Dark circles shadowed his eyes and his hands shook slightly. "I know there's more money," he snarled. "Gerald left you something else, didn't he?" "You're paranoid, Tyler. I'm broke!" The words exploded out of him. "The properties are mortgaged to the hilt. The business has debts I never knew about. Gerald screwed me." "No," I said quietly. "He showed you exactly who you really are." Tyler lunged at me, but years of physical labor had made me stronger than he expected. I grabbed his wrists, holding him back. "Gerald's letter said you'd understand eventually. He didn't give you wealth, Tyler. He gave you a mirror." 6 months later, Walker Auto Restoration was thriving. I'd converted Gerald's workshop into a specialty garage, focusing on classic cars and custom builds. The hidden account funded everything: equipment, insurance, advertising, employee salaries for the 2 mechanics I had hired. Mom helped with the books, her face glowing with pride every time a satisfied customer left a 5-star review. Mrs. Larkin brought cookies every Friday and regaled customers with stories about Gerald's vision for the place. Tyler had disappeared from family gatherings, his social media accounts gone silent. I heard through Mom that he'd lost the main house and moved into a small apartment. Part of me felt sorry for him, but mostly I felt free. Gerald's letter hung framed above my desk now, a daily reminder that real legacy isn't what you inherit, it's what you build. Every engine I rebuilt, every satisfied customer, every honest day's work added another brick to the foundation he'd helped me lay. I was no longer the forgotten nephew, the family disappointment. I was Ethan Walker, business owner, Gerald's true heir in every way that mattered. And that was enough.